Welcome back to Season 8 of the Working Audio Tools podcast, the home of all things mixing and mastering, the place where we constructively critique mixers and regularly interview professionals from the YouTube and audio communities. We start this season off on a slightly controversial note because something has happened in the last couple of weeks by the time this video comes out, and we thought we needed to address it. Now, what's happened is Universal Audio have released their new Gen 2 Apollo X's. And I, being the dutiful YouTuber that I am, delivered a concise and informative video on my channel to you guys listening and the YouTube community. And it was met with an interesting response. Basically, Universal Audio got absolutely destroyed in the comments for various reasons, which we may cover later. But it also got quite personal, and I ended up deleting a few comments, and one or two people clocked that I deleted comments, and that perpetuated even more grief and basically abuse. Now, my policy on my channel is if people don't like the product or the company, fine, they can talk about that. They can list X, Y, and Z reasons. That's fine. If you look at the video, all those comments are still there. I haven't deleted any of them. What I cannot stand and will not tolerate is the unnecessary negativity and abuse that was ultimately directed at me when I'm basically the messenger. You know, I have information from Universal Audio. I have contacts there. They wanted me to do a video because my channel niche is audio interfaces. So was I going to do the review anyway? Yes, of course I was, because interface content is good for my channel. But basically, I have a zero tolerance for any kind of negativity and unnecessary abuse. So I ended up deleting some comments, and this got Paul and I thinking about the whole nature of the YouTube world and confirmation bias as well, which we'll go into a little bit. So we want to break down the problem that this video created and what symptoms of the industry that this video is indicative of. Now, for full transparency, I do want to say that yes, Universal Audio did give me the Apollo X4 and the X8P Gen 2s in exchange for this video. I'm not going to lie about it. That's been in the description since the video went out, but I want you guys to know for full transparency. I was effectively paid to do the video in products, not in cash. Would I have done the video anyway? Absolutely, because if you look on my channel, audio interfaces are the best performing videos by far. Audio interface comparisons go into the hundreds of thousands. So this would have been a good video. Not to mention, I'm a genuine fan of Universal Audio products. I've used them for 6 years, and my Apollo infrastructure has grown with more devices as my studio has developed. Now, there were a lot of criticisms about the upgrade, and I understand those, and I responded to those where necessary. But Paul, what did you take away from this experience? What was it about this that you really wanted to discuss today?
See, for me, I just want to discuss interfaces objectively. Now, I think what I was able to notice was that a lot of the toxicity that came from that video, having made for lots of controversial content before. Now, Ed's content wasn't controversial. It was a very straightforward review going over upgrades. Now, for me, what's important, what I've learned in my time on YouTube and, you know, conversing with the audio community, is that there is a lot of reasons why many people tend to bash other products. And a lot of that is to do with confirmation bias. Sadly, it's to do with, you know, barrier to entry in regards to price. Many people can't afford certain things, so they'll bash things that they can't afford. And many people will bash things because it's just trending on the internet and because so-and-so says to do it. Now, when it comes to any piece of gear, but especially interfaces, I've always been a big believer that you always view any piece of gear, especially interfaces, on their own merit for who they are targeted to. Now, what I was able to see from the Apollo X update, the Gen 2s, is that many people were disappointed by the upgrades, and they maybe felt that the upgrades weren't enough to justify, you know, Universal Audio being on whatever pedestal I believe people still put them on. So what I wanted to do was go through the upgrades, and I'm going to give you my honest opinion on certain things that I believe, yes, that's a good thing. And I'm also going to give my opinions on certain things that may be improved, because I think that by having this conversation, is going to help a lot of manufacturers and also many audience members to kind of have a sit back and think, I don't need that, but I do need that. And if I don't need that, then why the fuck am I bashing somebody, let's just get into it, right? Let's just get into it. So Ed, let's start off with some of the upgrades, right? Because I can feel myself waffling. So, right, let's do it bit by bit. Let's just think of the upgrades and then we could kind of pass that on to other interfaces.
32-bit or 24-bit by bit?
Well, okay, let's start with that then, right? The whole 32-bit. My personal opinion, 32-bit, I don't care. I have been using 24-bit my entire audio career. Every interface that I've had has been 24-bit, and I've always recorded in 24-bit because I believe that, if you gain stage correctly, then, it's not really going to give you any benefit. Many people could sit there and say, oh, yeah, but with 32-bit going in, I could have more headroom. Well, not if you're using analog gear at the end of the day. If you're using analog gear, if you're using, compressors on the way going in, they have set gain staging that you need to go in. It varies on each unit, but again, normally they'll say that 0 VU will probably be around, I think, plus 4 dBu, which in some DAWs may equate to, minus 18 dBFS, minus 15 dBFS, minus 12 dBFS. It varies, okay? So gain staging is always a thing that's going to be important, and my issue with the whole 32-bit thing is that people are demanding it almost because some interfaces are doing it. I mean, there's microphones that are like the Rode, for example, the new Rodes, I think they've got 32-bit. It's a very moot point for me, and it's something that isn't going to give me any better audio quality. If you gain stage, you're going to get, for me, as good audio quality than recording with 32-bit. So whilst many people may see it as a deliverable from modern interfaces, I think it's one of these things that people want it just because they want it, not because they need it. 24-bit allows us to have enough dynamic range where the noise floor isn't going to be an issue. Right? 24-bit has been enough and will be enough for the end of time. Yes, theoretically, you could say 32-bit will be better, but it's not going to make me pay any more money for an interface. Other people's mileage may vary, but for me, it's a completely moot point, and I don't really see the benefit of 32-bit, and I don't think it's something that people should charge more for, nor should it be something that I think interface manufacturers should really give a shit about. I think half the time it's fucking a bit of marketing hype. It's just genuinely so people could sit there and say, we do 32-bit. In reality, I don't think it's as much of a... Yeah, I don't think it's much of importance. What's your theory on that, Ed?
I think if you're clipping 24-bit converters, you need to learn how to gain stage properly.
Yeah,
because
correct.
There is not a piece of music ever in the world that has exceeded 144 decibels of dynamic range. If that's not enough for you, you've got to be joking. Most songs have a dynamic range of about 6 decibels. So what are we talking about? Mute point. Correct. Next, let's move on.
Okay, so we had that, and then, conversion. Something that's very close to my heart, as we all know, because I've got the top-end DX7 Pro Plus. I went out my way to pay for, one of the arguably the best measuring DAC amps on the market. So if we think about conversion, many people were saying that the conversion upgrade wasn't enough. So here's the difficulty with conversion. The only way to quantify conversion is to test the unit out for yourself. Specs can only get you so far, okay? So when it comes to me, I had the Apollo X6. One of the reasons that I sold it was because I didn't like the DAC conversion. The DAC to ADC conversion, stellar. You can measure it. THD is super low, like way lower than any audio interface. But again, DAC to ADC is a very moot point because, again, I've done tests versus a Lynx Aurora and, it's very, very, very minimal differences. Just doing a pass-through of one DAC to ADC pass-through, it doesn't even give you a difference, not even a difference of 0.1 dB, not even a 0.1 dB difference. So it's a moot point anyway, but in terms of DAC to speakers, that is a different relationship. Again, you've got things that may be a little bit more audible. Why, I can't tell you, right? But either way, I never liked the DAC conversion of the X6. Now, this is something that apparently has been remedied. I don't know if they've changed the chipset, if they've changed the converters, I'm unsure. The good thing is that Ed has told me that to his ears, he's got the AXP, and he said that the conversion is noticeably better. So what's your opinion, Ed, on the conversion difference from, say, the X4, the X6, the AXP, compared to, the X16.
Okay, so across the board, as far as I understand, the ADC has not been changed. But the DAC has changed, and what they seem to have done is taken the desktop interfaces, that's your X-Twin Duo, X-Twin Quad, and X4, and they've improved the conversion on those up to where the previous rack-mounted versions were. On the new rack-mounted versions, the X6, 8, and X8P, they have utilized the best ESS Sabre DAC converters now. With the X16, as you said, they haven't updated that. That is the same. Is there still a difference? Yes, the X16 is still just in a league of its own. It's got an extra 4 decibels of dynamic range. But the THD readings now across certainly the desktop devices is virtually in line with the X16. And in terms of THD, this is where the huge improvement is. In places, they have lowered the THD by 15 decibels on the Gen 1 X interfaces. That is huge. Now, to put that in perspective, I put together a comparison chart, which is available on my website, which is comparing the new Gen 2s against an Antelope Orion, an Avid Carbon, an Apogee Symphony, a Lynx Aurora, and an Audion Aurea. And the THD specs on the new Gen 2s are far superior to all of those devices. Like, it's not even close. And people are still bagging them about the conversion. Now, what one or two people alluded to, which is correct, is that conversion is one thing. How that is integrated into the circuitry is also another thing. And there's a great example of this on my channel where I compared the Scarlett with the UA Volt interfaces, which has the same CS converter in. I can't remember the model number. And the Volt sounds better. Why is that? Something to do with how they've implemented it into the circuitry. UA did a better job than Focusrite. You can hear the difference. So yes, there is a point that the conversion is not the whole story. Integration is the full story, but without doing side-by-side tests, we can't tell. I've been called to do a RME versus X4 test at some point, which would be good, because I have to admit, RME is the one brand of interface I've not actually tried, which is embarrassing, I know, given I have the interface channel. So I may well get round to that at some point. But the statistics of the Gen 2s, they're competing with Lynx Auroras, the highly regarded converters. So basically, on the DAC front, there is a huge upgrade, and I think it's audible. You can hear it on the headphone amplifier massively.
Okay, and that brings me to the headphone amp. Now, this is where things start getting a little bit muddy for me. So,
pun intended.
What I did notice, okay. So what I did notice was that, yes, the THD levels have came down in the specs quite dramatically. However, the issue I've always had with audio interface manufacturers, and Universal Audio included, is that they are, what I feel, intentionally too vague in the specs. Now, when it comes to headphone amplifiers, the most important specification is the THD in relation to the impedance and also the power. So again, say per milliwatts, okay? So when we normally measure headphone amps, so for example, if you're going to say it has a THD level of, say, minus 110 dB, that's in relation to, at 32 ohms with a power of, I don't know, maybe like, fucking 230 milliwatts or whatever. All of these measurements, especially the THD measurements, are directly correlated to the power and the impedance. So I noticed on your sheet that you had it at 300 ohms, which is high impedance. But there was no reference to the power, the milliwatts that I was feeding. So obviously, I take all of that with a pinch of salt. So I would recommend Universal Audio and I recommend this every single, even Lynx and other people as well, to always do what Topping and other brands do. It annoys me that the audiophile fucking manufacturers, they are very clear and open. Actually, RME are very clear and open. I'll give their due. They're always clear and open about their specs. They don't even do dBA weighted. They don't use a weighting, which is, again, I think quite a good way of doing it. So as much as I take on board that in their specs they are showing reduced THD levels without the comparable and without the relation to power and impedance, I can't really take any of that on board. So it can, and again, I'm not saying they're lying or anything like that. I'm just saying that without that, it's kind of a bit of an irrelevant number because it's just like a number that's been thrown out there.
It's. I don't think it's irrelevant, but I agree. What there needs to be across the whole industry, and this is not just the studio, this is live sound. I remember researching PA speakers and coming across this. All these brands seem to configure where their products measure best. Now, that might be, at a 1 kilohertz output, or it might be, at a specific impedance, whatever it may be. But they advertise then the best statistic that they can measure.
Correct.
It might fall apart at 300 ohms.
Yeah, or 32 ohms. It might work better with high impedance, but it craps out at lower impedance.
Or the opposite, the Motu M series interfaces are known for being rubbish with low impedance headphones, but amazing. Well, not amazing, but noticeably, audibly better with high impedance headphones. So there needs to be a standardization, and I think there needs to be 2 measurements, 30-something, pick a number, whatever ohms, 32, 33, whatever, and 300. And those need to be the standardized ohmages that every brand displays figures for. It's the same with speakers. Everything needs to be measured at, say, 1 meter and multiple different frequencies. There needs to, like a white noise, a 1 kilohertz sine wave at 1 meter, on axis, 45 degrees off axis, laterally and vertically. To really give a true idea of the performance of these speakers, because it is important when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, as we have done in season 7.
And another thing to bear in mind, which is really important, which really bugs me, is say like on the topping, right? The topping E2, X2, E4, X4 is arguably the best headphone amp in an audio interface that I've measured, and many other people have measured.
Certainly under £2,000.
Correct, yeah, 100%. So obviously topping have proved that you can do it. You can put a high quality studio grade, headphone amp in a small interface. So it can be done. And even the DAC performance, it isn't, like topping DX3, topping DX7, but the DAC conversion is still really good. Like, it baffled me when I first got the E4X4 because I knew that many people were saying, the DAC quality isn't as good as, what you'd expect. But I was like, still, in my opinion, slightly better than audience conversion. And for the price, it's fucking incredible. Now, something that topping do is they tell you the max total power that that interface can do in terms of the headphone amps, which is really important. So, for example, what we are wearing right now, right, the HIFIMAN Sindar closed. I said this to Ed the other day. On the Evo 16 headphone out, I've got this right now at 85 dB. Obviously out of 100, right? This is at 85. I am cranking the bejesus out of that headphone amp, and it sounds pretty horrible. It sounds pretty distorted, pretty coloured, and I just don't think it can handle being pushed. It's a limitation of, a £400 interface. Now, the issue that I've got is that many interfaces that cost, $2,000, $3,000, some of the best brands, Lynx, Prism included, and even sometimes RME, their headphone amps don't have the juice to be able to power hungry headphones, which in today's market is really important when so many of us are moving to planars. Think about the amount of people that are on Odysseys. Shit ton of people use Odysseys. And there's many interfaces that don't have the power to adequately drive them. Because if you can't adequately drive the planars, you're not going to get that performance out of them. They need to be adequately driven, and they need to be adequately driven with completely linearly. And they need to have as less distortion as physically possible. Now, the only way to kind of have a good idea of that is to go in the specs and be able to see, right, there's a total max power, and here's a distortion level at 1K at fucking 230 milliwatts at 32 ohms. That's something that should be standardized throughout the audio industry, in my opinion. So, whilst it's good that they've brought down the THD, that is something that I don't know if still the Apollo X range has the juice to be able to power the HE1000 SE. if they have the power to, take a hungry planar? Do they have the power to be able to take, your high impedance Sennheisers, you know what I mean, that are very hungry? Do they have the power? I don't know, because all we've got is a fucking THD measurement. So, yeah, that's something that I think across the board needs to be worked at. And it's just unfortunate that UA haven't taken the decision to go into the weeds and give us the specs that we need, because if they did do that, then maybe you would have the ability to turn around, in a review and say, well, actually, this is a professional grade on paper, a professional grade headphone amp, because, it compares to blah, blah, blah. It can be adequately driven. And again, it's got low distortion levels at blah, blah, blah.
I agree. And this brings us to a very good point, which is UA got criticized for being expensive in the first place and taking the opportunity of this new product launch to raise the prices even more. And I'm talking about £500 per interface, something like that.
Yeah.
Prices will change. There was outrage about that, but people generally don't understand that there is a release bloating of prices. Come Christmas, come New Year, these prices will have eased off pretty much to what they were. All these brands do it. Everyone does it. Not going to name other brands, but they all do it. There's a release price. They optimize what they can over the initial sales push and then bring things down for people on the fence. So let's be realistic. The prices will come down a little bit. That's not me speaking on behalf of UA, by the way, before anyone says anything. That is my opinion. Now, with that, yes, Apollos are expensive. But as I pointed out in one of my previous videos, 4 Reasons You Hate Universal Audio, is that they do a lot of things, including all the DSP processing. They also got nailed in the comments about out-of-date Shark DSP chips. They work great. DSP still has a function in modern-day recording and mixing. It runs unison preamps, which is their impedance and gain matching integration with the analog preamps software. And it works really well. Then you've got all the zero latency or sub 2 millisecond latency on-board processing that happens on the Apollos using these Shark chips that is relevant for tracking. I have people in the studio to sing and I give them some compression and EQ and reverb in their ears with zero latency. There's no going through the door. All the processing happens pre-door for them on the Apollo. They love it. It's great. I use it. I enjoy it. That's why I've stuck with Apollos. If you don't need the DSP side of it, yes, there are cheaper interfaces available to suit your needs. If you want the lowest round-trip latency because you insist on monitoring through plugins in your DAW, get a Motu. Again, I've got downloads on the members area of my website, which is now free to everyone, by the way. I opened it up. There's no need to sign up. The specs chart for the Gen 2s is on there as well. And there's also charts on there comparing other round-trip latencies of interfaces. And Motu regularly, like by far, measure better than all other interfaces. So maybe that's for you. If you want unrivaled, routing options, RME is good. If you want something that's better for Windows, go for an RME. If you want what is even slightly better than the Gen 2 conversions, yeah, you could probably get an Antelope Orion or a Galaxy. Whatever your needs are, there's an interface for you, as we discussed with the Topping E2X2. The preamps on that aren't great, if I'm honest. If you're spending £200 on an interface, get an Audient. The preamps are better, audibly better. But if you want the best headphone amp in that price point, and arguably below £2,000, as I said, I do stand by that. It is that good. Get the Topping E2X2 if that's your focus. There's the beauty of the world we live in now. There are so many products out there. We are getting into a point where we are getting to diminishing returns, where people, I think, on this update for UA wanted miracles, but wanted it to be cheaper. And you've got to be realistic, because going from where we are now with technology, you are rapidly getting into diminishing returns and exponential price increases to deliver diminishing returns. So for the average person, and Universal Audio are targeting, let's say, average people, they're not with the Volts, they're targeting beginners. With the Apollos, they're targeting, the serious hobbyists or the semi-professional studios, or if you go up the line, the professional studios. X16s are in loads and loads of huge commercial studios. Pretty much every studio we went to in LA had an X16, didn't they?
Yeah.
Because so many people are producing and using Apollos. Billie Eilish, famous for recording on an Apollo. And because they offer so many features, there's something for everyone. So there are good average of everything you'd want in an interface. Now, this brings me back to the video in that if you don't need DSP, why do you need to slag off a product that's got DSP? And more to the point, why do you need to criticize the guy delivering you the information? You don't. It's unnecessary. If it's not for you, fine. You can have an opinion. That's fine. I don't mind if you verbalize opinions on my videos that are different to mine. Or, if you find different facts that counteract what I've said in the video, although in this video it's unlikely because most of it came from Universal Audio themselves. Again, it's open, as we know, as we've discussed, statistics are open to manipulation. But if you disagree, say so in a polite fashion. Cool, let's open up a conversation about it. I'm interested in learning from the audience. I've learned loads from my audience in the past 4.5 years doing YouTube. But do it in a constructive fashion. If you don't, you can fuck off. I'm not interested. Now, basically the point being, there is something out there for everyone, and if it's not for you, just move on. Why the hate? Why the vitriol? It's unnecessary. The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. Don't forget, you can't just upload your songs to Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, or Tidal. You have to go through a music distribution service. There are many out there, but DistroKid is the one that Paul and myself use. They don't take any of your royalties. You keep 100% of the streaming revenue that you earn. For just $1.92 a month or $22.99 a year, you can upload unlimited songs. Your lyrics can be found in Google and other places. You get the blue Spotify verified checkmark, and you can create royalty splits between yourselves and fellow contributors. You also get access to the new DistroKid iPhone app for editing and uploading songs and accessing your statistics on the move. There are plenty of other tools available on DistroKid. We'll go through those in another section.
No, I agree with you. And, look, at the end of the day, I think what we kind of need to be looking at as a community is kind of coming to an agreement on what do we actually require in an interface, right? So if we kind of go back to the X range upgrades, I'll kind of run through a few of the things that I thought, fair play. Does it equate to a £500 difference? We'll leave that up to other people, right? But a few things I thought was quite interesting, and I think there's certain things that I think everybody should be moving to now, and you are seeing it now, was I think UA had to do the auto gain. It had to be done. But what I really, really do like about the auto gain is when you said in your video that it works with the Unison preamps. I think that's a big, big, big selling feature. And on the DSP side, right, for me personally, I've got an i9, right, desktop Windows. It's not the most powerful in the world. And trust me, see the DSP, it was very, very handy. And I will admit, I still miss it. There is a lot of UA plugins that I do like, and they do make a lot of high quality plugins. I'm going to be honest with that. And I think something that many people forget is that DSP isn't cheap. Now, in terms of the Shark stuff, I don't give a shit. Now, I've got an idea why UA do the Shark thing, right? Because it's a manufacturing thing. I'll guarantee you that they've had a deal with these Shark processors for years and years and years, and it financially, it's more beneficial for them to keep using the Shark chips, right?
And also to redesign the interface is going to be even more expensive to implement new processors. So it's, there's a compromise everywhere.
Yeah, I never had an issue with the Shark stuff. I always thought that I had the XX, right? I had the XX version 1, and in version 2, it's got the same Hexa core, right? It's got the same fucking Shark chips in there. But either way, I actually found the DSP to be pretty good. I was able to get quite a lot of plugins in there. Again, there's some plugins that are more CPU intensive than others. I like the fact that I was able to use the Unison stuff. Again, as Ed said, fucking basically latency free, a sub fucking 2 milliseconds. And you're not going to get that on other interfaces. You know what I mean? So the auto gain I thought was a really good feature. I think it's something that really should be implemented. I think after Audient, made that a big feature with the SP8 and the Evo 16 and stuff, I was like, right, okay, that needs to be kind of, But
it's
the
AI
issue
for preamps, isn't it? Let's face it. It's doing everyone a favour. It's cutting out a job.
It is. However, obviously, that does mean that all your preamps need to be digitally controlled, and there is some talk about whether there is an audible impact on having digitally controlled preamps as opposed to not having that. That's debatable.
I've done videos on this on my channel, and I will put my hand up and say I am of that opinion that yes, the digital preamps are not as good as the fully analog one. And the Scarlett Gen 3 to 4 is a great example. The Gen 3 preamps sound better, in my opinion. I'm going to use the words you hate, deeper and richer. That's the impression I get. Now, with the Universal Audio preamps, this is where they're interesting because they're already digitally integrated and they don't lack that depth, in my opinion. So to put smart gain on, auto gain, sorry, on a Neve 1073 modeling preamp or an API Vision channel strip, brilliant. I can't wait to use that when I'm recording drums. I've literally sold my previous interfaces. I had the Evo 16 with an SP8. I could do auto gain on 16 channels. Great. As a drummer, arm everything, press it, let's go. Easy. I can now do that on the Apollos, which are, in my opinion, better preamps, and I can use a unison modeling technology, which is a win. Just going back to the DSP you mentioned quickly, the reason UA get a hard time about the DSP, I think, is because on the X6, that was the first generation of the Hexa cores, which were considerably more efficient than the old DSP cores that they had on the previous models. Now, the other place they get stuck is on the Duo, or the Solo only has one DSP chip, which is basically one unison preamp and maybe a channel insert, a monitor insert plugin, maybe two. You're not going to get much out of it. The Solo is fundamentally flawed, in my opinion, for that, and they should just bin it. The twin Duo, which most people get because they don't get the quad version, because at least this was me. I didn't get the quad version because I thought quad meant 4 inputs. I didn't clock that it meant 4 DSP chips, and that I didn't even know the X4 existed. So the 2 DSP chips enables you to do maybe between 6 and 8 plugins if you're in a mixing session, or 2 unison preamps and, 2 monitor inserts per channel plus maybe a reverb. So you do run out quickly, and that's largely why people hate it. So I would always say get as much DSP as you can if you're going to get an Apollo. And if you're on an X4 that's got 4 chips, or an X6 that has 6 hexes, you're not going to run out while tracking. Now, if you move into trying to do, 7 plugins per insert, then yes, but let's be realistic.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And there was many times that, the DSP really did help me out in a session. I do genuinely benefit it from a mixer's point of view. There are times that, I've had a session really push the shit out of it, and I don't want to commit stuff. And I've just been able to go right, dink, 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 and add a few plugins in there that I would maybe use native. So I had auto gain, and in regards to people saying, "Oh, can we really, justify the price?" Let's bring that this is really important to me. The Ed had the Evo SP8, and he was specifically using the Evo SP8 on his drums for the auto smart gain, right? So if you think about it, the Ed had a £400, expandable. It's not an interface; it's just an expandable unit. He was able to sell that and just use the Apollo for that. That was a feature that would cost somebody £400 that he was using that specifically for. Now he doesn't need to do it, and he could do it with the Apollo Unison preamps.
So there's a little bit more information to put even more context onto that. Prior to having the X16, I had the X8P Gen 1, and I was using those preamps for recording drums. Fantastic. When Evo bought out the 16 and the SP8, I chose to use those. Again, I'll be transparent. I got them for free from Audient in exchange for some content. But I chose to use those for my drum recording just because auto gain makes it so much easier. Then I took the opportunity to swap out the X8P and get an X16 for all my analog outboard gear. So now I've gone from the Evos, gone back to the Apollo X's. It's a noticeable upgrade. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think about the price of what an Evo SP8 is, it is, £400. So even just the auto gain in itself and be able to do it with the Unison preamps, I would argue that upgrade alone is a pretty damn good upgrade when we consider Ed's experience of having an expandable unit that is specifically just for auto gain. That's all he was using it for. So that's a big update, right? So I like that. The bass management side, I think, is something that every interface should have bass management. But then obviously the bass management gets into the whole monitor control side of it, which is something that I think UA have been lacking for so long, and that's the way everything is going now. So they have got the Sonarworks integration now. which is good. You can export monitor profiles into console now. You have your own monitor profiles, and the bass management is there. So again, if you've got a 2.1 system, you can set your crossovers and stuff.
Now, guess what? It all operates on a DSP Shark chip.
Yep, I know. Again, I don't have any issues with the fucking Shark DSP. Always worked fine for me.
It all operates. You can do headphones and monitors on one chip.
Yep. Where I think it's a little bit lacking for me is the opportunities that are available. Now, obviously, I use Audio and Aria for my Atmos setup, right? And we'll do Atmos very briefly at the end because I know Ed gets super fucking bored about any time we mention Atmos. But I know. But in terms of the whole monitor side of it, I do think that there's a few things that they could have done that they've not done because they've got the DSP. Now, I did a little bit of digging, and from what I can see, they've not allowed manual EQ moves on their monitor profile. I had a look and couldn't find that anywhere. So from what I can see, you can import the SonarWorks, and that's that. But as good as that is, the only options that it gives you is you can set your bass management, which is limited because you only have 3 frequencies that you can choose from, which to me is limiting because Aria allows you to set your crossover, which is very important because if you don't understand bass management in regards to subs in a room, sometimes you might just need to manually set your sub in terms of your crossover, set your crossover very finely to get the point where everything measures just right in the room. So I do think UA kind of missed they should have just made it something that you could
I agree.
Manually tweak
someone
it.
like yourself will want ultimate control. Yeah. Most people will be happy with 80, 100 or 120. But just to correct you, once you've loaded in the profiles, you can EQ stuff as you would Sound ID on your desktop. So if you want to do the high and low pass filter thing and then do a custom curve and change frequency points, you can do that.
But so you would have to do that on SonarWorks and then import that. That's the way you can do it.
You can do it in the console.
Okay, so now I tried to look for that and I couldn't see it. I was looking at your video and I was trying to see where there was any point where you could do a manual EQ. I could see that you could change the trim, so you could trim every speaker, which is good.
Yeah, but
I didn't see any manual
window that does effectively come up, and you can tweak things.
Okay, so they've got this integration where you do it via the SIMD ID way, and the two of them work together.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is powerful.
Yeah, it's powerful.
I don't know why it's been criticised.
But I think it's obviously because I've got Aria, so I would find that way a little bit convoluted. You know what I mean? Because you've got to do it through SIMD ID. I'll just finish the point, right? The issue with that is that with Aria, you don't need to use SIMD ID. You could manually calibrate and EQ them and set everything independently.
Yeah, I think Aria's got its own system.
I think UA missed a huge chance there to give the audience more. So when you put that into the new Apogee Symphony Studio 2x12 that they've came out with, you can do 7.1.4, but again, you can also do various monitor profiles, and they allow you to manually EQ maybe 12, 15 bands. You can add delay, which is something that I noticed you can't do manually on UA, but again, SonarWorks does do that for you. I just think that they missed a massive market for many people that like to manually calibrate their own systems, because you can do it on other interfaces now. And I'm surprised they didn't do that.
So on the Dolby Atmos 9.1.6 spec that they offer on the X16 with the new Sound ID integration, I don't know how flexible it is in terms of EQing each speaker. Yes, Aria has. I've seen the software. It does have that expansive software that enables you to really go into detail on each speaker. I'm not sure about the Gen 2s. Don't quote me either way on that. But what you can do on the Gen 2s, which is great, is, as you said earlier, bass management. And in the UA update, you have to pay $50 for the update if you own Sound ID already. Now, there was uproar about that. Why should we have to pay for it? It should come on, blah, blah, blah. With that update, you get something that isn't available in Sound ID, which is sub-speaker bass management.
Yes.
You can now calibrate your room with a third output, with a 2.1 system, and Sound ID will calibrate the EQ and the time alignment in reference to your top speakers, to your main monitor speakers. Normal Sound ID doesn't do that. This is a Gen 2 specific feature, which I'm sure will go to every other interface at some point, but this is a bonus of having the Gen 2s. Now, you've only got the 3 different crossover points, okay, and yes, I don't think you can then calibrate the subwoofer individually further than that, other than the generic stereo profile, but it is in the background aligning the bass and the bass frequencies and the time alignment with your top speakers for you. So it is pretty flexible, and obviously you've got a 5.1 system on the X6 and a 7.1 surround system on the 8s. The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. For a little bit more, $39.99 a month, you can have 2 artists on your roster, which includes everything just mentioned. Additionally, synced lyrics in Apple Music, further streaming analytics statistics. You can create a customizable record name. Mine, for example, is Ed Thorne Rhythm and Records. And you can customize release dates, pre-order dates, iTunes pricing, and again, much more. Now, if you're an artist manager or a record label, the Ultimate Bundle gives you up to 100 artists for just $89.99 a year. And you get 1 terabyte of instant file sharing, which is useful, but also contact information for thousands of playlist curators on Spotify. This is really useful so you can pitch your artist music to playlist curators around the world, only available in the Ultimate Bundle from DistroKid.
Now, one thing I will give you they're due here, and again, many people, this is what annoys me about the audio community, is that they will tend to, just brush aside certain things because it doesn't really fit their narrative. Now, again, me being completely objective, again, I don't have UA. I had an X6 and sold it, so I'm completely objective. I plan on getting fucking, another Apollo in this version 1 or version 2, but I have to give them their due that they have made the decision to make that SonarWorks upgrade for the Gen 1s as well. Many manufacturers would have made the decision to make this a Gen 2 thing only. Yeah. So I'm going to give them credit where credit's due, that many greedy manufacturers would have made this a Gen 2 thing. And to be honest, if they did do that and they didn't make it Gen 1, I don't really think anybody would have batted an eyelid, really. They would have been like, okay, fair enough. That's part of the upgrade. So you can't really moan that it's not really worth a fucking £500 extra. But I'm like, yeah, but they're giving you that. They could have easily just made you pay for that, as well as the auto gain, as well as the bass management, as well as the monitor control profiles. I'm like, they could have done that, but they didn't. So I'll give them, credit where credit's due. And I do think that's something that every interface is going to have to do eventually. But the issue that I've got, and again, it just annoys me that everybody tends to do this thing with SonarWorks, where I'm like, see, when it comes to headphones and you're wanting to EQ to Harman, like what I do all the time, I don't advise SonarWorks for headphones. Me and Ed don't use it. Right? Again, there's many reasons. I've got videos as to why. So it annoys me that they missed an opportunity to have manual EQs in there, so you can manually EQ to Harman and scrap the whole SonarWorks side.
Yeah, but you can do that in Sound ID.
All right, okay, but you're missing the whole point, Ed. Right? The difficult thing is to manually EQ your headphones. You need to buy SonarWorks. So imagine if you've not got SonarWorks and you're like, I don't give a fuck about SonarWorks. I just want to have my headphone out manually EQ'd, and I can just select a different monitor profile.
Okay, no, you do need, if you just want the headphone outputs, you do need to buy the Sound ID headphone profile pack, which I believe is $99, and then I think it's £50 for the UA add-on integration. But speaking of EQ, what UA have done with Sound ID is utilized UA's own algorithms for the EQ, which are superior to Sound IDs. So it is an advanced version of Sound ID now.
I'm gonna disagree with you there. I'm gonna take it. The reason I disagree is because I actually agree with the convolution method. And again, I'm pretty sure that's what Adam do, and it's what Aurea does, is it takes a convolution. So it's not like, obviously imagine all the bands you would need for the SonarWorks, so it's fucking mirror correct and it's going daft. You could download or import text files. So they've got a 10 band version, a 15 band version, maybe a 20 band version. But what Aurea and many others do is they use a convolution file. So basically it's a convolution file which incorporates the phase as well. So if it's mixed linear, minimum phase, and it's just one file and it pops on there, And that's how I think they're able to do all of the, Ori is able to do all the multi-channel one. So it utilizes SonarWorks multi-channel. So it's just one convolution file instead of trying to make a algorithm or like, and kind of do it in so many EQ bands. And, if you do convolution, it's easy. Again, you're not mucking about with the phase. Where my worry is knowing that UA is doing their own EQ algorithms is, how do we know that it is actually sonically better? What could they do that's any better from SonarWorks? Is it incorporating, if you're using mixed phase, is that incorporating the mixed phase correctly? How many bands is it using? But in the convolution, it's exactly what the final one should be.
And I can answer that.
Okay.
Cool. We'll never know, because that is information UA will never release. I don't even need to ask my guys at UA. From what they've said already, I know they will not give that information out.
Right. So obviously for me, right, if we take it back to the whole point of headphone outs, again, it was a massive, massive opportunity here, because so many people are mixing on headphones that even if they just done it for, actually scrap it. No, they should have just done it. They should have just give you a manual EQ. It could have been 8, 10, 12 bands, because at the end of the day, they're fighting against the Neumann MT48, which has onboard DSP manual EQ. So you can, again, we've been there with MSM, and he's like, okay, there's that headphone, that headphone, that headphone, that headphone, and he could do it on the actual unit itself.
And they just stepped it up from 4 bands to like 12 bands or something. It's,
and obviously,
ridiculous.
when we think about headphones being so popular, to me, that's something that's going to have to be, a deliverable moving forward, that there is onboard EQ for monitors. And again, it could be your main outs, and it could just be an EQ, whether you do your monitors. Because again, there's people out there that will measure with Room EQ Wizard and prefer to do their own EQ, like scrap SonarWorks, scrap Arc, whatever. But in terms of headphones, I do think they missed a massive, massive opportunity. And that's what the things where, that's why we're objective. You know what I mean? Because when you're objective like that, you could say, right, yes, the SonarWorks thing, for people that have already got SIMD, you're going to be like, thank the Lord, I use SonarWorks, I use SIMD, like, great, this is a great implementation, it benefits me. For other people, they're like, yeah, and imagine it would be a good upgrade, but I now have to shell out for SonarWorks, which I wasn't planning on doing. So if you've not got SIMD, it's not going to help you out, you know what I mean? So, and there's lots of things like that. I mean, there's lots of things that people can come out with that just don't meet your needs, but it doesn't mean it's a good upgrade, you know what I mean? Like, it is still a step in the right direction. UA should have been doing monitor correction, monitor profiles, bass management. All of this should have been stuff that was integrated for me a long time ago, and now everybody's starting to catch up with it. And that's the way things are moving forward. The only thing that I really disagree with, in my personal opinion, is the Atmos side of it. They had a huge, huge, huge chance to get themselves in the Atmos market, and they've just completely outpriced themselves, because the only one that can do Atmos 7.1.4 is the X16. Now, the issue with the X16 that I have, and this is something I've always had an issue with, and many people have disagreed with, is that with the X16, the way that they've made the X16 from the start is that there's no ADAT, there's no SPDIF, it's Thunderbolt only. So you can only use the X16 with the Apollo infrastructure. You cannot use it with another interface. So again, if you wanted your X16 to be the main interface, you couldn't then chain that with an Audient, with a fucking Antelope or fucking RME, whatever. And I think they had an opportunity here to make the Apollos a little bit more multifunctional and a little bit more fucking user-friendly. If, at the end of the day, it's not cheap. You know what I mean? Like $3,500 or $4,000, whatever, for an X16. You know what I mean? I could easily, go, right, okay, I want high quality fucking, ADC, DAC, whatever, for your analog gear. And you want all the fucking benefits of the DSP and everything that X16 offers. But, you might be like, right, but I kind of still maybe want an Evo 16 for the main interface, you know what I mean? Because it does X, Y, and Z. I think that that's something that they need to get away from. I think this whole kind of forcing a lot of their ecosystem on users is putting people off. And I think that they could, you can integrate universal audio with other interfaces. I did it, right? So when I had the X6, because that's got optical SPDIF and it's got ADAT, I was able to chain the X6 with the SP8 that's controlling that other rack. I was able to do the live room, and with the optical SPDIF, I was able to connect it to the topping DX7 Pro Plus. But if you've got the X16, then you can't do that, which to me is just a massive missing point. And then when we think about Atmos, the issue I've got with it is that they're trying to add Atmos into it, and basically they're trying to add Atmos into a system that isn't really built up for Atmos. The X16, in my opinion, it's just for analog gear. That's all it's for. There's no preamps in it. It's just genuinely for analog gear. It's for I/O. But because you've got the outputs, they're like, oh, so we've added this new kind of monitor control thing, and again, you've got the bass management and stuff, and you can select, do the trims, and I don't know whether SonarWorks multi-channel works with it, like with Aurea. Me and Ed don't know that. I don't know if it works with SonarWorks multi-channel, which is important if you're doing Atmos, trust me. But
I know it works. It's just it's not got the extent. It works in 9.1.6 with Sound ID, but it's not got the
right. So
what
it
we're
does
not
work
sure
with,
on. Yeah, what we're not sure on is the customizability that Aurea has.
Okay. So obviously, if you think about price-wise, right? I think the X16. I can't remember if it's like. I think it's 3,700 when I checked on my phone. That's what the price I was able to get.
3,666 on Thomann.
Okay,
right now.
so let's see 3.7.
Links
right?
below, guys. Links in the description. Yeah.
So let's say 3.7, right? Aurea just now is $2,500. Now, obviously, the UA could sit there and say, right, with the X16, you have an extra 4 line in and line out, because obviously you're only using 12 line outs, which means you've got your line in, line outs. Now, with what Aurea did was Audient thought, right, this is just a monitor controller. So what we're going to do is we're not going to give you any line ins, because there's no point, because you can't use the line ins for analog gear because you need line out to line in. So they gave you 2 additional ADATs for ADAT in, so you could use Aurea as a standalone monitor controller and still use all the same things with the app and stuff, and connect that into another system.
Doesn't it have 2 preamps on as well?
2 preamps. And also you can connect, because it's 2 ADAT ins, if you want to use it as the main interface, you can connect 2 SP8s to it, or whatever you want to connect to it. So you can have, 16 mic pre's going into it. It doesn't have ADAT out, which I think was something the audience should have done. I think there was a missed opportunity there. I would like to see Aurea being expanded more. So again, there's always kind of missing points, but I think that what UA could have done here is UA could have went, right, we don't need the line-ins, right? Let's just scrap the line-ins and think about, Apogee. I didn't think Apogee were going to do this, but they've made a 2X12, which is basically just what Aurea is, with no mic pre's. No, it does. It was 2 mic pre's. That's coming in at $2,000, but it doesn't have any of the SonarWorks integration. But it is trying to compete with Aurea, and it is £500 cheaper, but there's no ADAT at all. It's genuinely just like a standalone interface. Can't be connected to anything, 2 mic preamps, that's it for the budget, if that's what you need. And many people may sit back with the Atmos side and think, right, that's all I need. I don't need, the extra bells and whistles of Aurea. I personally think you do. I do still think it's the best on the market, but I think UA had a great opportunity here, was to create another X range just for Atmos, scrap the line-ins, and just say, right, we're going to give you 16 line-outs, right? Again, because some people will want to use 9.1.6. We're going to give you 16 line-outs, as well as what Aurea's got, which is the 2 independent stereo outs. So in my system, I've got a headphone amp, I've got the edifiers, and I've got my 7.1.4 set up, and all of that can be controlled via the app, via the iPad app. So I could generally just go Atmos, stereo, headphone amp, and I've got all my headphone EQs as well. So when I press it, it'll switch to the stereo out for the headphone outs with the EQ on it. It's fucking magic. Like, that's to me where the future is. And I just think that Universal Audio's just went, right, we've got the X16, we've added a few things in it to make it work for Atmos, but I'm like, it's too expensive. It's not giving you all the compatibility that you get with other interfaces, like Apogee and Audient Aurea. They should have just thought, right, let's just make a separate interface. Let's just take that technology and create something that's around the $2,000 mark, because you'd have to be fighting, you'd have to be competing. Maybe they could do maybe 2.728, because it's got the DSP, which is a benefit, because Atmos does take a lot of CPU. Atmos sessions take more CPU than a standard session. So having that DSP with the Universal Audio actually becomes even more important. So there's an opportunity there. I just don't think they grasped it with the X16.
Well, I think they may not have grasped the opportunity that you're presenting, but what they've also done is grasped the opportunity to deliver Atmos functionality to everyone who already owns an X16.
True.
And that is a lot of people. So if I want to go to Atmos, I can do it, and I don't need a new interface because I've already got it.
True. Again, whilst that is a good upgrade, for somebody like me that's already got, say, Audio, it doesn't meet my needs for Atmos, but as Ed has just said there, it could easily meet somebody that's already in the UA infrastructure.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be a first-time Atmos buyer.
Yeah.
Probably.
But if you're in that infrastructure, like somebody like Ed, if Ed did decide to go Atmos, he could. You know what I mean?
Not with my expensive taste. Fuck that.
No, fucking hell, Jesus. But, at the end of the day, that's what is important, right? I think what people miss is that people just see Ed, gets fucking the Apollo stuff for free and is like, oh yeah, he's a fucking Apollo shill, Universal Audio shill, or whatever you want to call him. At the end of the day, he's been using that system for over 6 years. He has made recordings on it. He's worked with clients on it. He's got his full analog gear set up, and he doesn't have any crashes because he's on Mac. Now, that's another thing that I was a little bit disappointed in, because there was no talk about Universal Audio adding in any loopback functionality, which I think is an absolute must. Fuck's sake. Like, I know they always come out and say, well, we're for the studio. Well, unfortunately, we're studio and we do a fucking podcast, and we need streaming functionality. I couldn't get that with Windows. It was like having to use Jack Router and fucking Voice Meter Banana. What an absolute hassle.
There is a way around it, which I've used for every podcast and video I've ever done, that is effectively loopback. But yeah, it's not
only on Mac. Windows, I couldn't do it. It was an absolute fucking pain in the
It's
arse.
a console thing. I don't know if it's Mac specific. That's a subject for another video. Just quickly, I wonder if Universal Audio's decision not to make an Atmos specific device, which they may do in the future, who knows? I doubt they will. I wonder if that's indicative of their opinion of how much Atmos will take off.
But then when you look at Apogee, for example, okay, many people will say, well, obviously Apogee are going to do it.
Clear Mountain's
Clear Mountain's fully in Atmos, but even just, for the fact that it's a monitor controller that's offering you all these kind of options, I think at the end of the day, I know Audient have sold quite a few Audios, and they're in that market. And, if we look at, we're not going to get fully in Atmos here, right? But at the end of the day, I know tons of Atmos mixers in the industry right now. There is a market for it. That nearly every top fucking 40 hit has an Atmos mix with it. Nearly. I'd say maybe like 90-85% have them at the moment. So I did think they missed a bit out, and I do think it's a little bit of a disappointment, because they're like, oh yeah, look, it's immersive. Yes, it's there. You just could have implemented it better. And I just think that that's maybe the whole, if we could wrap everything up and say that these upgrades, I think, are worthwhile. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think what people are maybe a bit pissed about is that maybe they could have been implemented maybe a little bit better, and there could have been a little bit more attention to detail, and they could have maybe added a little bit more than what they have. Maybe that's something that's going to come in future. But at the end of the day, what I think is very important to always remember, and I always have to get this in my head all the time, is that I am not, he is not, and you are not. Maybe you are, but I'm going to take a guess if you're my audience. You are not a interface designer. You don't understand anything about the circuitry or what it takes to, implement certain things. There are going to be reasons why, you can get such high quality conversion when people talk about a Lynx Aurora, right? But at the end of the day, does Lynx Aurora have any DSP? No. Does it have, all the bells and whistles like auto gain? No. Is a Lynx Aurora going to have those? Probably not. Are people still going to buy Lynx Auroras? Yes. And somebody like me is going to sit there and go, why the fuck are you wasting all your money like that? And they're going to sit there to me and say, because I value, on paper, I value the quality of the conversion, Paul. I don't give a shit about DSP. I don't give a shit about, your SonarWorks integration. I don't give a crap about fucking Unison preamps. I don't give a crap about X, Y, and Z. Again, it might be RME, and they're like, I don't give a crap about the RME drivers, blah, blah, blah. All they care about, is one thing, and that's all they care about. And I think that's what's important to remember, is that there is as Ed said, there's an interface for every single person. But I think what we need to be mindful of is that whilst we want certain things, we do not understand what it takes to make an interface. I couldn't tell you how hard it was for UA to implement the things that they added. I know for a fact, because I was a beta tester, Audio Aurea was an absolute pain in the bollocks for them. The amount of firmware changes we had to make. There were so many bugs in beta. And even with the iPad app, we've been at it to try and make it work. And Aurea was buggy to begin with, but then it's shown me how hard it is to even just make an interface that can do what Aurea does. And even just think about when Universal Audio brought out the Volt with the 1176 compressor on it. That was impressive. I was impressed by that. I was like, wow. Somebody
For
actually
the money,
put in...
but still wasn't good enough for some people.
Yeah. And
It's
now
not a
you've
real
got...
1176. No shit, it's not a $2,000 compressor and a £200
Totally.
interface. Go figure. Use your brain, don't make stupid comments.
Yeah. And then,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. That's fine. But I think, look, I just think we're going in the right direction, right? There's now an interface for everybody. Even the fact that Heritage Audio have now basically brought out a 1073 fucking, interface. And Neve have one as well, so you can actually get a 1073, with a Neve interface. Okay, and that's the thing, right? If you really value a 1073 sound on the way in, that interface might be for you, but the Neve interface doesn't have all the bells and whistles that other things might have. Again, it's going to fail on the fucking headphone amp. Its conversion might not be as great. It might not have X, Y, or Z, but that 1073 might be the thing that you go, that makes it a deal breaker for me. And all I'm saying is, right, and this, again, me hodgepodge, right, is understand that you don't have an idea of what it takes to make these things, that there's always limitations for everything in the analog fucking world. There's a limitation for everything.
Paul, you're preaching to, not to say this about people in the audience, but a lot of people just don't give a fuck. It's not their job to care. All they care about is the end result and how that affects them. And the community on YouTube spoke that they weren't impressed with it. They had zero tolerance for how physically impossible things may or may not be. They just don't care. And that's the curse of being a brand and a manufacturer.
But it shouldn't be that way. That's why I always try and remain objective, that, look, there's a limitation to everything. There is going to be a time where we look around and go, we've reached the precipice of what we can get out of an audio interface. We might get to a point where we're like, we have everything that we need. Not everything that we want, but everything that we need. And at the end of the day, right, I do genuinely believe that, the Universal Audio line with the X range is pretty much all singing and dancing. Yes, as I've highlighted, there are things that they could get better. Everything can get fucking better. There isn't an interface on the market that is perfect. It does not exist. Will we get to a place where it does exist? Probably 10 years, but are we going to, do you need all these bells and whistles, right? That's what you need to have in your head. Everything comes at a cost. If you don't want the DSP, then the Universal Audio isn't going to be for you. But if you want the DSP and you want all the bells and whistles and you want console and you want fucking the Unison preamps, then you're going to pay for that and you're going to sit back and go, yes, my bias is towards fucking the X range because that's what I need. We just need to stop fucking arguing and fucking look at things objectively and just be fucking happy that we're in a place where we could just add more things on. Look, at the end of the day, the upgrades were the upgrades. I think a lot of them were beneficial upgrades. And what's really good is that what I've highlighted is that Universal Audio can get better. Maybe that's what people are frustrated about, that they were like, well, they could have moved there. Well, we could say that about everybody. Just be happy that we're in a place where it's a progression. We can only get better. It can only get better from here.
They could have made the Gen 2s better, yeah. And they could have made the Gen 2s the best interface of all time. But what are they going to sell you next?
Yep, and that,
there's
again,
a reason
reality.
These companies,
of course,
besides economics, they need a continuous flow of new products. That's how capitalism works. Our entire global economy is built on it. There has to be another product. So they have to hold some things back. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are meetings going on in all these companies. Yeah, we could put that in, but in 3 years' time, that's going to be our major update on the Gen 3. So who knows? I think healthy to be cynical, but not too cynical about these things. So bringing this back to the video, I think we're going to do an episode next week regarding confirmation bias, because there was a lot of people just slagging off UA because they didn't own UA or they didn't like UA or they were very brand biased. And both of our experiences in the past of I think we've been guilty of confirmation bias at some point. You
Everybody
less so
has.
than me, I think, because you're pretty merciless with your products. But I'm getting a bit more merciless now with it.
Because
you're
of
rubbing
me,
off
Ed.
on
I always say that I've been a little bit of cure. I've been a little cure for Ed's confirmation bias at times.
And
But
annoyingly,
he is very headstrong.
Paul
He is very headstrong,
always
ladies and
right.
gentlemen. He is very headstrong.
Ed Strong.
And on that bombshell, let's leave it there. What a pun, yes. Ed is Ed Strong, yes. We're going to make a little banner of that. He's going to have it outside his door, and yeah, that's going to be your new thing, is it? And that should be your business, Ed. Come to Ed Thorne. Ed Strong. Douche. And on that note, I'll leave you. Ed, is there anything you would like to say, or are you happy to leave it on that shite pun?
Just a reminder, really, that for people who watch and consume YouTube content for free, when you're watching it, please bear in mind that the person who's presenting that has spent a lot of time developing the skills, the knowledge, and doing the research to present the information that most of you guys want and some of you guys need. The reasons a lot of people need YouTubers is because they either don't have access to the products to compare themselves, or quite frankly, can't be bothered doing the comparisons themselves. Now, we're fortunate in that we get access to these products, and it takes a lot of time. And in mine and Paul's case, away from mixing, which is what we want to be doing, it takes a lot of time to learn these products, research them, develop the videos, produce the videos. You have to be a scriptwriter, a researcher, a presenter. You have to shoot B-roll in my case. Paul doesn't bother. You have to then be a director of photography for the video, editor of the video, putting in audio editor as well. There's so many skills that goes into this. Please appreciate it, because it's pretty disheartening when people don't. And I think that's what got me down about the response to the videos. Like, I don't have to deliver this quality information. What are you going to do if all the YouTubers stop doing reviews? You're fucked. You've got to go and buy stuff yourself. Do the ABs yourself. You just won't. So you'll make the wrong decision. You won't get as an informed a decision as you could get, or as you do get, because of YouTubers. Anyway, I'm going to stop blowing my own trumpet. But if if you do want to support the channels, purchasing any of your home studio gear through the affiliate links in the descriptions of those videos is a great way to support them and us as well. Super thanks. And I think it's about time we introduce that buy me a coffee thing, Paul. Should we do that on this episode?
Yeah, we should. Yeah.
For season 8.
Buy us a coffee. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you don't have to. But if you feel like this has been valuable content, we've never asked anyone for money at this point, and we're 8 seasons in now. We do get sponsored by DistroKid still for now. That helps us do this, because to be honest, what you don't realize as well behind the scenes is that it's about a day's work for each of us to get this podcast done. By the time we record it, chat during the week about what we're talking about, edit, Paul does the audio, I do the video. If it's an interview with someone, it takes me 4 hours to edit. Then we upload, Paul does the thumbnails. It takes us each about a day. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it does.
Anyway, we appreciate your support. You are an awesome audience. We're really happy that it's growing. Thank you for coming on this journey with us. And it's been emotional.
Bye-bye.